All right, welcome everyone. My name is Charlie O'Donnell, and I'm a pre-seed and seed investor at Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, located in New York City. And I'm going to kick this off by saying that I feel like I was the last person on the face of the earth to know that pre-seed was a term, even though I technically had a pre-seed fund. I didn't know there was such a thing and had to be told by others, and this was a couple of years ago. So I'm going to kick off this conversation by actually just before they even introduce themselves or say what they're doing. As I put this panel together, I was struggling to figure out what we were even talking about. And so we're talking about, I called it programs for pre-idea founders, but in like one or two words, what is your program? What do you call it? What's the word? Shriya, why don't you start us off? What is it?
Okay. So I would say early explorer founder community. It's four words.
Okay, Roslyn?
I'm going to use a term, it's internal, but it's called spike. And I'll talk about that a little bit further on, but spike to us is a mix of passion, grit, and obsession with problem solving. And that's something that we look to build with our founders.
Okay. Elise?
Great, yeah. Humans in the Wild is a 100-day no equity program, and we try to get experienced founders from idea to fundable state.
Okay, I'm going to push you on that though. You call it just a program. If I would do you think it fits within a larger like category? Because there's accelerators, there's incubators. Like, what is the category?
For sure. Yeah. No, I was trying to avoid those terms so we could be creative here. But I would say we're half incubator, half accelerator, and that you can come into the program to develop that idea, incubate it, really figure out what's working, and then half accelerator, and that we are there to help you create that early stage go-to-market plan, help you get funding, take it from there. Okay,
cool. So, so you kind of jumped into my first question of just like, a little bit about the program and sort of what it's for. So I'll just stick with you, and then we'll kind of go back around. So you're working with humans in the wild. Just at a high level, at what point do you like to engage with these smart people who may or may not have ideas? Like, what is the stage and the career timing in their entrepreneurial journey that you want to hear from people thinking about your program?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I would say, so Humans in the Wild is run by the venture capital firm Human Ventures. Human Ventures makes pre-seed investments. So because of that, we are looking to work with established founders at a pre-seed level. So that means to us, you probably have the idea. You probably know this is what I'm dying to solve. You have the idea of what you want to do. And then we can really help you, think about who your core customers are, thinking about getting that minimum viable product out there, think about fundraising, leadership, and taking it forward. But it is at this point, and especially for our fall cohort, people have come in with an idea of this is the problem I want to solve.
Gotcha. And when you say established founders, do you mean that they've established the idea, or I have to be a repeat founder or a known quantity in the ecosystem, or can I be sort of just a first timer with a good idea?
It's a great question. I think, because we are so early stage, we do love working with founders who have already started something. Perhaps they've sold that company, perhaps they've just built something. But we've really expanded that term in terms of who we're reaching out to include as many types of founders as possible. So that has meant, maybe you've been an entrepreneur and you've had a more corporate job, started something new there and taken it forward. Maybe you've started a few startups, and for whatever reason, you're on your third venture. But we want people that have done something entrepreneurial before, if that provides more clarity.
Yeah, sure. Roslyn, what about you? Tell me a little bit about your program and the what stage somebody should be, thinking about an application?
Sure. I think very similar to some of the aspects that Elise had mentioned already. So Antler, we have this generator aspect to it. That's a word we like to use, generator. And also we are an early stage VC investor. So how we think about the founders that we engage with and what stage that we're looking to engage with them, it can range from someone who, as Elise said, has this entrepreneurial background, has worked for really established firms, but is a known executor and is also obsessed with solving a problem that we think we could help them, on their journey of solving. We also work with companies who are a little bit more accelerated. So some of these companies already have their betas out. They're already post-revenue. They are potentially going on their next rounds of fundraising, their seed and Series A rounds. So what we like to call this process, it's a two-way due diligence process. So for us, we are working with an individual or a formed team to learn more about them, get to intimately know how the team works and how the business operates. And at the same time, they are doing their diligence on us. Are we the right partner? Are we providing the right resources? And can they see us being a great investor?
Okay. Shriya, what about you?
Yeah, so I think to share a little bit of who On Deck is for and why you should join it, we should go back to kind of the beginning of how it started. So Eric Torenberg started with On Deck dinners. And so he was running these dinners for people who were secretly or publicly exploring their next thing. So they might be at a full-time job and not even want their employer to know that they were considering leaving to start a startup. And these dinners were completely confidential, sponsored by VC firms, and they would be themed around an industry like healthcare education. And he started expanding those around the world. And then started the On Deck Fellowship last year, realizing that a lot of people were looking for the same kind of thing. Why don't we kind of bring them together in a sequence? So the On Deck Fellowship today is a 10-week program. And what we really focus on is we want top talent from around the world to think of On Deck first. So when they're saying, I'm going from, oh, maybe I should start something, to, okay, I really want to start something ASAP, that's when they join On Deck. And so that means that they don't have to have a clear idea. They don't have to have a clear team. On Deck, we purposely put together 200 people per batch to create that liquidity for you to be able to find a co-founder. And I think that one of the biggest boons that we got from COVID happening, one of the only silver linings, is that now our program is totally global. And so we have founders from all around the world who have on average 5 to 10 years of experience in either the tech industry, in engineering, product design, or another skill set, or they have deep expertise in a different vertical. So they're artists, they're musicians, so they know a lot about that space, and they would be an amazing partner for somebody who has more of the tech or business side. And they come together and join the program when they're imminently starting. So we don't want people who are I'm thinking about starting something in a year. That's too early. And then we would say that too late is probably if you've already fundraised. But we definitely have fellows who have already launched their product, or who maybe have raised a little bit of angel money, but they haven't kind of doubled down, and they haven't found product market fit yet. And then it's a really great resource for them during that phase.
So is it fair to say that On Deck might be either half a notch earlier or maybe even complementary, that I could go through On Deck and then potentially wind up in Human or Antler?
I think right now, I think it's still a negotiation for each person who's looking at each of these. We've had people who have done one of the other two wonderful programs here before, or have done it after. I would say that the thing that's much clearer, because all of us are on this panel, because we're in this really early phase, is the transition to something that might give you funding, like doing Y Combinator or raising a formal institutional round. That is certainly something you do after.
Gotcha. Cool. And so all of that sounds really awesome, but I got to imagine there's some cost to it. So what is this going to cost me if I get in? I mean, that's one thing to keep in mind too. These are all application programs, right? So if I was lucky enough to get in, I clearly get a lot of benefit, but I'm trading something for that benefit as well. So Shriya, you guys have a straight cost, right?
Yeah. So the reason that we have a flat cost is because we want to give you an amazing experience. So this is really the core of what we do. Everyone's like salaries. We have this great team. We've expanded to 18. But another one of our philosophies is just that equity is much more expensive than cash. And so we purposely made the program focus on cash rather than equity, so you can preserve that equity and not give it away too soon when you don't really need to. Another thing that we're really focused on is increasing access through scholarships and a new access fund, which we actually just announced today. And so you can check our Twitter to hear a little bit more about that. But yeah, it's purposely just like a membership fee with no equity. And another benefit to that is that you don't have to be building a venture skill business. If you did look into your idea and you realize that it's better off bootstrapped, it's better off as a freelancing business, that's totally cool.
Gotcha. So Roslyn, your model, the equity that you are looking for, you're obviously hoping that these businesses become venture scale business. And I'll be the first one to admit that they don't all become venture scale businesses, but at least like you don't get there with your model unless it has the potential for that. So if I'm, applying, I should have some clarity, some certainty that this could be a venture scale business if I'm going to apply to Antler.
Exactly. So I think the best way to, well, the original question too was what's the cost? And the cost really is your time, your commitment, and the option for Antler to invest. So how we do it is once a candidate, an individual or a team is accepted to the program, they actually get a $4,000 grant along with signing terms that say that Antler has the option to invest after we spend this 12 weeks or so of working with you and helping you develop that idea. And you're completely right in saying that it has to be a VC backable business that has the potential to scale tremendously, but we're also very involved in helping you kind of ideate throughout that entire process and make sure that it's a great fit for both of us.
Gotcha. And so, and you also mentioned like individuals or teams. There's a component there that's all about possibly meeting somebody else too. So I could come in as a onesie and possibly pair up with somebody else in the program.
That's right. So that's one of the biggest value propositions of being part of a community in general. Entrepreneurship can be such a lonely journey. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that. But the fact is, we look for superstars who can be solo founders, but who can also be self-aware and recognizing, okay, maybe there are certain gaps in my skill set that can be filled with a domain expert in X, Y, or Z, or with a potential VP of technology. So what our team does, and Caroline runs our recruitment and marketing function, and she not only recruits for Antler and looking for these individuals, but also she can help an individual find someone in our pipeline who wanted to be a founder, but maybe a better fit as an early employee of one of the folks we're already working with, and connect the dots there. So that's an example of how we're really hands-on with helping folks find the best fit.
Gotcha. And you said there's sort of an optionality on your part. So if I make Antler, I'm working on my idea, maybe it seems promising, but ultimately maybe it doesn't quite meet the bar. It's not a guarantee, as opposed to like if I make Y Combinator, I'm getting that cash, but if I pivot on day 3, Y Combinator is kind of stuck with me. Like there's a little bit of there's sort of a little bit of a hurdle after actually making the program. As people refine their ideas, you guys make a choice to invest or not.
That's right. So the culmination of our due diligence process, the two-way due diligence process I was talking about, is an investment committee. So that investment committee is kind of the apex of whether or not we decide to continue the relationship. And that's, if someone does not pass the investment committee, then, there are a couple of different options there. We might have them stay in our Antler alumni network, or we might decide to engage further down the line in a more passive capacity. We always leave our doors open to people we've worked with and we've enjoyed working with, even if we don't decide to make an investment during IC.
Cool. So Elise, how does the price cost, show me the money? Like, how does it all work? Or am I just keeping my money? How does that work out?
No, absolutely. So at Humans in the Wild, it's no cost to join, and we also don't take equity up front. I think similar to what Shriya and Roslyn have said, it's a lot for these early stage founders to give up equity on day one. And so part of the benefit to us is that we build a relationship with the founders, to know them over the course of 13 weeks. And then decide at the end of that program whether or not we're going to invest. So it's a little bit, very, very founder friendly in general.
And are the terms, if you work with me for 13 weeks and I refine my idea and it seems really awesome, did I pre-agree to the terms, or it's just an open negotiation process at that point?
It's a negotiation process at that point, yeah.
Okay, so in some way you could sort of think about it like another, like a venture firm with a pipeline in front of it of an interesting community, no promises on either side, right? Someone decide, I didn't necessarily promise to take your money, and you didn't necessarily promise to invest.
Yes, that's correct. I think, I think we do hope to fund probably 1 to 3 of the founders in the Humans in the Wild program. We usually have a cohort of about 12 teams. Sometimes, like in the upcoming class, we have 11 teams and 16 founders. So that can look a little bit different. But at the end of the program, we kind of set out with what our intention is in terms of funding at the beginning of the program, but understand that it's a case-by-case basis with each company. Gotcha.
Yeah, you always have to leave it open for, maybe you guys just don't like each other at the end of this. I mean, that's fine too. Like not every investor and founder is a match. So when you set out to provide value in these programs and to help entrepreneurs solve problems, what are some of the main difficulties as you think about what you offer? What problems did you see founders running into trying to get off the ground that you're trying to solve through your program? Elise, maybe you can sort of keep going on that. What are you specifically trying to help founders with that you saw as a difficulty?
For sure. I think one framework we use for kind of, 0 stage company building or early stage company building is just a simple, what's the problem? What's the solution? Why now and why you? And so I think sometimes, one thing we really look for in our applicants is that clarity of vision. Some people come in wanting to do A and B and C and D, and it's really about, what do you have to do right now to prove early traction? So that you can get that early funding. You mentioned, Charlie, at the beginning, like, I didn't even know that pre-seed was a stage. I think we're all faced with this kind of macro issue in that a lot of venture capital funding has gone upstream, right? And you have to prove out so much more today to get that Series A check than you did even 3 to 4 years ago. So helping people being really clear on what is the problem, what is the solution, and building from there are often kind of what we see. And the last thing I would say there is, just finding early stage customers, right? Whether that's consumer or enterprise, especially when we have teams building for an enterprise solution, that takes time to get those early pilots going. So helping them get off the ground there, again, to prove traction is something we really help them do.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% in agreement. As I look back over the 7 or 8 years that I've been running Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, I am more than happy. I would say probably about half the companies that I funded have not launched a product yet. And so I'm probably one of the earlier stage funders. The folks that I used to do deals with 7 years ago just aren't in that space anymore. And VC firms tend to get larger and later as they raise more and more funds. And so it is hard for founders to stay current on where the bar is, because it always seems to be moving depending on the stage. Roslyn, what are you guys trying to help founders with? What do you see as some of the difficulties of people trying to get off the ground?
So part of our founding thesis is that there's such a gap between, friends and family, angels, and then to later institutional rounds of funding. So what we're really trying to do is to institutionalize the friends and family round and to de-risk that jump to entrepreneurship. And one of the ways I think that is pretty unique that we try to do is pick up a lot of the administrative slack that occurs when a founder is trying to build and scale. So whether that's recruiting support, like we talked about earlier, or fundraising support, or just like, how do I incorporate a lot of those resources the Antler team can help provide. We can be an interim CMO, nothing official, or interim CTO, and then just help founders gain more time and energy to doing their core business. And that's something that we're really proud of.
Gotcha. Shriya, what solutions are you trying to provide that founders need help with?
Absolutely. So I think that one of we have our core values list on our website, and the real number one core value of the On Deck Fellowship is the spirit of service. And so one thing that we look for in every single person who joins is that you give more than you take. And I think that really kind of describes what makes the entire community tick and run. So I think that some things that we see people are seeking out and looking for is expert resources. So cutting through the noise, we have a content library with tons of amazing workshops, in-depth discussions, talk, and tactical resources so people can get unstuck in anything that they're facing, whether it's go-to-market strategy or marketing, something like that. And then, of course, spaces to be vulnerable with the other fellows. I think that we're really focused on helping you through the toughest parts of the early stages of the journey. So it's not just about like, let's all try and hit this milestone. We don't have any kind of demo day at the end. It's really not about trying to funnel everyone into the same outcome and the same process when that might not fit every different person's business and goals. It's more about, let's put you in this community of people where you will be able to find the people that you might want to work with or learn from or have as advisors or mentors. And finally, kind of building on that advisor and mentor, I think that one thing that's particularly helpful for people who might be outside of Silicon Valley is that we have just like a crazy network of Silicon Valley VCs and founders who have offered up their time and their generosity to connect with our fellows. We bring people in for kind of like VC dinners. So we had Bain Capital Ventures, Excel, and we have a few more coming up. And those are always a great way to really meet face-to-face people who are partner level that otherwise would be really hard to access. And so I think that all of those kind of culminate in the real core problem is just people need others who are going through this journey at the same time as them, not a little before, not a little after, not talking to your friend who started something 6 years ago that didn't work out, but people who are in the thick of it right now. And that is really, I think, the primary resource we provide. Whether you end up meeting a co-founder or not, you still have those people who are by your side every step of the way.
So Jake asked a good question about verticals, because you've each talked to bringing in experts, using the community, hooking people up with partners and all that sort of stuff. I'd be curious if any of you feel like you have a vertical focus, or do you feel like your communities are large enough that even across lots of B2B sectors or anything like that, you feel you can sort of match somebody up with? Like, how do I know that if I'm in some, long tail kind of supply chain management, super niche kind of thing, that you've got somebody for me? Or do you tell people, hey, we're more consumery or anything else? Elise?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to take that one. So human ventures, our real investment thesis is around investing in the human needs economy. And so what that means to us is around health and wellness, which was our spring cohort, future of work, which is our fall cohort, and community. And so we have launched our cohort so that you can have, 12 health and wellness founders all thinking about the same thing at the same time and helping each other get there faster because you're all working on the same thing, kind of within that cohort model. Human Ventures as a whole is a consumer and consumer technology VC firm. So within that, we see a lot of different kind of sectors, but that's how we organize our cohorts, is around our investment thesis.
Gotcha. Roslyn, are you more of a generalist, or do you have specific verticals that you focus on as well?
Sure. As a firm, we are industry agnostic. Of course, there are areas that we're constantly refining our investment thesis as we observe other, I don't even want to say trends, but there are areas that we are more interested in today, such as fintech, health services, and life sciences. But the overall, in terms of support that we can provide, it's the fact that we curate a global network of advisors in very often niche, like you were saying before, whether it's supply chain management or food delivery. We have specific advisors who are well tasked and well equipped to help solve certain issues that come up from a founder who's building within a certain space. So I think the global scale aspect really helps with that matching process. And when a team joins Antler, they're assigned a dedicated coach who might be more of a generalist or who might have direct experience in what that team is building. But that coach also has the backing of hundreds of other experts who can also be connected to help.
Gotcha. Shriya, so super wide, focus, deep. What's your network like?
Yeah, so the On Deck Fellowship is totally open to any industry. I think that one thing that we will see is across different batches, if there's something that's a general startup trend, it'll of course be very popular in that batch. And so, of course, like right when COVID began, future of work, a lot of people building remote work tools, B2B SaaS, tons of people excited about communities. But that said, we don't define or narrow the focus at all by industry. And one of the defining features of the fellowship, I think, that makes this work is that we have a super engaged alumni community. So the alums are still looped into a wide variety of resources, and they're hosting workshops and office hours for the current fellows to create kind of those cross-batch connections. And because of that, you have many more people who you can reach out to and learn from, even if you're in a relatively focused or narrow industry. And so I think that makes it really powerful to create those like cross-vertical connections.
Gotcha. So let's move off for a moment on, comparing the programs and just talk about this stage of entrepreneurship in general. A lot of people are asking themselves right now, like, maybe I have an idea, maybe there might be something worth working on, but are people crazy to be possibly thinking about leaving their jobs right now and starting a company in a really uncertain environment? Like, what do you say to founders who come in and say, I'm just not sure if this is a good time? What's your first response to that?
Yeah, I think that I want to pull out a Warren Buffett quote, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. I think this is actually a really fantastic time to be building a company. People in tech are, a lot of them who have the level of experience that we're looking for are super employable at any time. And yet to start a successful company, you need a lot of hits and you need to take a lot of chances. This is a great time to take those swings because everybody's raising remotely. Everybody can work with and meet people anywhere else. And so I think that this is a great time to take a chance on something that has potentially been in the back of your mind, but you haven't been able to come to fruition until now.
Just in terms of that taking a chance.
Yeah.
Can I still hedge my bets a little bit? Like, is your assumption when I participate in On Deck that I'm doing this full time, or is it okay if I still have a full-time job or a side gig or anything like that?
Yeah, we have a good amount of the cohort does this while they have a full-time job, but often in our alumni survey, they say, I wish I quit sooner so I could take full advantage of it. So I think that it's one of those things where if you know that you're going to have the time and the energy to leverage the community, but a full-time job will help you pay your rent and give you that security, that totally works, but it is a lot to juggle. And I think that if you have the energy to put in, that will give you all the more out.
Gotcha. Roslyn, is your assumption that the participants in Antler are full-time on their startups?
We don't have any written requirement, but the vast majority of our founders are indeed full-time, and the others have some path to being full-time very shortly. Sometimes that might be the inception point of investment committee and raising funds. So it does take a lot of commitment on that end. And to answer the other question too, I think it's always a great time to be a founder. And COVID really accelerated and unearthed a lot of societal issues, a lot of issues in all realms that can be solved. So I think if you look at the financial crisis, there was Slack and Venmo and Square, I believe, were all born of the 2009 era. So there's always opportunity. I love the quote that you shared, Shriya. I think there's always opportunity and uncertainty.
Gotcha. Elise, would you agree, or are you going to take the contrary view that now's a terrible time to be a founder?
No, I think I have a mix of perspectives here. I think I'll address it from kind of like the founder and individual level, and then two on the macro level. So on the founder and individual level, we are a full-time program. We have about 5 or 6 hours of required programming per week, where we provide strategic advice. We have a proprietary curriculum. You meet with your mentor, peer reviews, et cetera. But we do ask that people are building about 30 hours a week. We obviously understand if people have part-time gigs or consulting, especially now with COVID. There are plenty of parents who are also educating their kids while they're building these companies. But it is a full-time program for us. And then taking that out to the founders who are asking themselves, should I make the leap right now? I think, do it is this keeping you up at night, right? Is this problem so urgent and you have such passion around solving this that you're willing to make the commitment? So much of what we see in like the founder market fit has this problem kept this person up at night. So if you're there, that's one reason to consider making the jump. And I also think too, make the jump when you have some conviction. You've talked to some people, you have, floated the ideas past possible customers, because there are plenty of ideas that other people have already thought of. There are other substitutes. There might not be the urgency that you have around it necessarily. So I would do some early testing before quitting your full-time role. And then lastly, on a macro level, similar to what Roslyn was saying, we've been telling this to founders a lot too. A lot of those in the last recession, a lot of the great companies we're using now companies are built in a lean manner in a time like this. So it's also a really good time to build a company because you're building really smartly.
Gotcha. I'm so glad you mentioned the idea of something keeping you up at night, because I am actually going to take the contrary view and just tell everyone very honestly that now is a terrible time to be an entrepreneur, that you'd have to be crazy to start a company right now. It's going to be really hard. There's a ton of uncertainty. It's hard enough to raise venture capital financing if you need venture capital financing, and VCs, despite our reputation as risk takers, are even more confused now as to when to expect markets to come back and all of that sort of stuff. So it's going to be really, really hard. However, I'm excited about being an investor because the people that I'm picking from now is everybody that completely ignored everything that I just said and felt like they had to do it anyway. Right? And felt like they just could not put this problem down, and it kept them up at night. They are absolutely sure it's a thing. It's tough to focus on anything else. And, look, I think the real difficulty is that there are folks for whom there are economic and time realities. But the one thing that I would say to those folks is it's never too early to be making your pitch. We've got programs here, some of whom provide capital, others who provide networks that could connect you to capital. I've funded many a PowerPoint, and in many instances, people who are pitching me are saying, if you fund me, I will quit my job. And that's fine. I've talked to people about identifying teams, and I always tell people, you could always identify a team. Identifying a team is free. Hiring them is not free. right? So if you're just at the point where you're like, this will be my team once you fund me, that's fine too. Like that totally counts as a thing. So yeah, I think it's not a good or a bad time for the founders who just can't put it down. Like that's not even the way they really think about it. So I'm glad we're all here to provide those founders as much support as possible. So it also sounds like there's some consensus that while there is some flexibility around whether people are working on their stuff full time, there's certainly program commitments and expectations and you certainly get a lot more out of these programs if you're working on it full time, and you can contribute a lot more to the communities if you are. As you all look through the application process and talk to these applicants, what are some qualities that maybe you're finding in short supply that you wish you found more of? The idea of entrepreneurship and being a startup founder is something a lot of people aspire to, but sitting on our side of the table, there's sometimes where you wish that people had more of out of the group who fashions themselves to be an entrepreneur. Anything come to mind along that group? Roslyn, I'll ask you to start off.
Sure. I mentioned the term spike earlier, and to elaborate on that, it's really a mix of that obsession with problem solving that, it's the same idea of I can't sleep at night. No one is building this. I need to absolutely build this. And I think that is something we try to tease out in our written assessment is, you could be a really strong, accomplished individual on the resume, but in how you're thinking about the problem statement that you want to work on, how articulate, how passionate does that come through? So I think that's something we are, always on the lookout for. I think the other thing is team product fit. Elise mentioned this earlier too, but it doesn't have to be that, you have founded multiple startups in the past, or that, you have this amazing experience in whatever corporate world, but the team product fit of knowing that you are the right person with the right skill set to solve a very specific niche problem is important. And also the awareness that, you don't become an entrepreneur to become rich. Being a founder isn't glamorous. It's not, it's really grueling. So that's the expectation versus reality. And we want to see a degree of that awareness and humility come across in the applications and the interview process.
Cool. Shriya?
Yeah, I think that that one thing that we commonly see that I wish people would kind of empower themselves more about, honestly, is people who are waiting around for a co-founder or a technical co-founder. They say like, oh, I can't start building this until I have this elusive person. So I've just been sitting on this idea for months and months and months. And I think that one thing that the On Deck community is really energized about is the no-code movement. We have a lot of people offering no-code workshops, building things together in our weekend hackathons, which we do twice per batch, with no-code tools like Airtable, Zapier, Webflow, and really just increasing that accessibility to building software and things that are really just software enabled, and the innovation is somewhere else in the product. And so I think that one thing that we love to see is the people who maybe they aren't technical, but they went ahead and they put together some kind of prototype. They used Figma. They did an online course that taught themselves something, and they just kind of barreled through anyway. Or they used what is in their skill set to go as far as they possibly could, and now they want resources and additional people to help them get to that next level. But I think like basically just not counting yourself out of what you can uniquely bring to the table, because especially those people who are experts in a certain industry and vertical, but are maybe not as familiar with the tech world, they often come in with this level of insecurity and with this worry that, am I going to fit in, and will I really be able to be a startup founder? But the crazy thing is, like, we talk to them and we learn from them, and we hear that they had 14 years, built up a law firm from scratch, went to a top law school, but they still think of, oh, if I'm not a software engineer, can I do this? And then they build an amazing like legal startup, and 6 months later, everything's like sunny again. But that's, I think, one thing that we wish people would do. It's like come in and realize what you have to offer and what you uniquely bring to the table as a founder and as a builder.
I'll give a +1 on that. You hear a lot that you need a technical co-founder and all of that sort of stuff. And I've funded plenty of companies without that. It makes me think of a portfolio company of mine in the travel space called Nokin. And I funded them when they had a bunch of revenue. I think they'd done almost $100,000 worth of revenue off of the InVision like demo app that you can create on their platform. So people would sort of buy in to a completely planned trip via various type forms and emails or whatever. And what you would get was an app, but there was no code behind the app. It was just built on InVision. And that was like almost the first $100,000 of customers. So totally doable to grab financing and to move to the next step without necessarily having having a developer. Elise, what do you wish you found more of in the applicant pool?
Yeah, for sure. This is especially timely for us, where we just closed our applications 2 weeks ago. So we've been reading through hundreds recently. And as I think about this, I think part of it is kind of those soft skills around high EQ, being self-aware. I think sometimes it's a fallacy that you need to come in and be this like confident, overambitious founder. Yes, we want to see that, but balancing that with humility and intellectual honesty of this is where I am and this is how I'm thinking about this problem. So you can really be teachable, right? We want to see that we can work with you in building that idea, fund you, and continue to work with you for the next 10 or so years. So I think that's part of it. And I think with that too, we know you're going to face roadblocks. We do not expect you to have figured it all out literally on day one. And so we're really betting that this founder and this person will figure out the problems as we reach the hurdles. So I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is really around like clarity of thought and simplicity. Sometimes I see applications where, again, the solution is going to do X and Y and Z. And before you know, it's going to kind of be the one technology that everyone in the world uses to solve every problem. Sometimes that shows just like a lack of simplicity and a lack of clarity of thinking. Just explain, again, what's the problem, what's the solution, and I think that clarity of thought leads to succinctness. And what we're also looking for in that is, as we all know, founders have to wear so many different hats. And so you have to explain this to the investors and explain this to the ops team and explain it to your grandma and explain it to anyone. And so we want to be able to see that you can kind of switch hats and explain it to a lot of different people. And again, I think that comes with kind of clarity of thought, simplicity of thought, and some succinctness.
No, I appreciate that. I always tell founders that, look, my default is no, right? It's not my default is not a check. My default is to say no. And if I don't understand what you're doing, then I'm still at my default, basically, right? And so it's very easy to think you have to over complexify things to impress someone, when really, if you're just like, we're building X, no one's done it really well so far, that's helpful. At least I have some understanding, and then we can sort of proceed in the conversation. The folks who make the most of the experiences that they go through in your program, what are they doing? I'll continue with you, Elise. How do you get the most out of going through Humans in the Wild?
For sure. I think one kind of carries over from my previous answer around being teachable, right? We have a proprietary curriculum. We're bringing in all of these outside advisors. We are telling you what we need to see to get to that next level. So being able to listen to that, being able to pivot and being teachable is one part of it. I also think kind of being able to pace yourself and trust the process. We have a 13-week program. again, we don't need you to be solving week 13's problem during week 1. And so really just kind of like hitting the milestones in front of you. I know founders have so many things going on in their mind, but really being able to focus on this week, this is the problem I need to solve, and just continuing to pace really helps. And then I think the last thing, which again, I think Antler and On Deck all do really good jobs at as well, is community, right? We want you to be able to take advantage of the community, whether that's other cohort members, take advantage of the network that we're putting in front of you. I mean, we have a full-time network person there, so that when you say, I need a product person that has built in the health and wellness space, we can queue up all those introductions for you, taking advantage of the advice that the investment committee is giving you, the outside investment committee from other venture capital firms, and then the guest speakers. We curate a lot of guest speakers that have fireside chats with the founders, some of whom end up investing in those cohort members. So taking advantage of those relationships in that community as well, I think we've seen as a good way to succeed.
Gotcha. Cool. You cut out there a little bit at the end, but I think we got
Oh, sorry.
most of that. No, it's totally fine. Shriya, how do I get the most out of On Deck?
Yeah, absolutely. So we frequently describe the On Deck Fellowship as a buffet. There's no component of the program that is absolutely required. We're not dragging you to anything that you don't want to go to, because we want to provide the things that's most valuable to you based on your journey. And as I think I've mentioned before, people are coming in with slightly different goals. And so I think that the main way to get the most out of it is develop clarity in yourself on what is your goal by the end. The goal might be, I want to raise a pre-seed round by the end of this 10 weeks. I want to launch my prototype and MVP on Product Hunt, get 300 upvotes, like get a couple customers. I want to get 50 customers, whatever that is. Have that North Star in mind, because there are a lot of resources that we throw at you, and that is on purpose so that there's always something that can solve whatever your need is. And a couple of fellows have written blog posts that are really fantastic with their advice about how to make the most of the fellowship. I think that one of the things that stands out across all of those is developing this kind of internal personal brand. So within the community, becoming known as the go-to person for some certain thing. And so maybe like the go-to community from 0 to 1 person. And a couple of ways to really make that happen and show that off to the rest of the community are to host your own workshops and sessions, offering office hours to fellows. And then I think the deepest and most valuable thing is actually working together with people. One thing that we saw a couple of fellows do that was really fantastic was they offered up to say like, hey, I am a front-end developer, so I'm going to sit down and offer like 6-hour days, and I'll do those once every Saturday for the next 6 weeks. If you want to sign up, if you're interested, if you need a front-end dev to build something for you, let's chat. It's a fantastic way to kind of test out potential co-founders and early hires and get to know the other fellows and just give back to the community. We just find that the more people give back, the more they get in return. And I think that building up that kind of expertise and being known as the go-to person for something is the best way to do that.
Gotcha. Roslyn, how do I get the most out of Antler?
So well spoken. I think there are a lot of elements that I would echo from what Elise and Shriya just said. One is that coachability aspect, being willing to learn, being humble and willing to improve. That's so important for us. To add to that, though, Antler itself, what we hope that our founders can give to us is transparency too, because we want to build a relationship. Yes, we might be an investor ultimately, but we want to build a relationship where you feel comfortable making all of the asks that would help you succeed, but also give us the feedback, the candid feedback that we can to improve in our real-time engagement with you. So I think one way to make the most of that experience is just trusting your coach and trusting that you can be open with him or her.
Gotcha. So I wanted to open up to questions from other folks who are watching, but as they muster up the courage to ask a question, I have a totally selfish question. And as someone who tries to bring communities together, I'm curious. I posted this question on Twitter and got, of course, a million different responses. But what tools do you use to connect your community together? And the reason why I ask is there was a very nice Twitter debate on whether people are tired of Slack or, too many emails, or I've heard people, WhatsApp groups and whatever. First question is, A, are you satisfied with community tools that are out there? And B, if so, like, what are you using to connect your community together? Shriya, I'll ask you about your experience with that.
Totally. So the hub of the community is Slack. And I think that the reason that it's working for us now is because we have people kind of categorized by channels based on different industries and different things that they're building and working on together. And then some core channels for each cohort to get to know each other and have a central repository of information. We have a lot of people in the fellowship who are the people building those community tools. And so we're always like getting demos from them, checking things out. I think right now, because all of the other community tools are in the earlier stages, they just aren't as robust as the like discussion and networking tools that have been around for years and have built out a lot of integrations. But I think that one thing that we're focused on is we're building our own internal directory. And so this is kind of a central on-deck fellowship hub that has profiles of every fellow. We want these to be like kind of a souped up LinkedIn. People add projects and ideas that they're building, and then other fellows can comment and work together and browse through the ideas and then say, okay, let's build this during this hackathon weekend, or hey, I've built this before and I know why it didn't work out. And so I think that over time, we are building our own software to fill in all of the gaps that we see that Slack might be missing, and to start to bring more tools and resources to our fellows.
Gotcha. Roslyn, what about you guys?
Yeah, I think we're also predominantly on Slack, but two tools we've really liked using. One for social sessions, icebreaker video. I think that's been a really fun tool, especially due to everyone being at home at the start of the summer. The other one is a similar kind of team collaboration, get to know each other tool that is actually a portfolio company of Antler Amsterdam that came out of the cohort and is now fundraising. So ATM is another one that I'd like to kind of throw out there for everyone to look up. And finally,
ATIUM?
ATIUM, that's right. Yeah, it's a fun social tool as well. And finally, we do have the Antler Founder Hub, which is both a back-end platform for us to compile our notes and work internally, but also very similarly like a LinkedIn page that has all of our founders, the teams that they're part of, the advisors, where you can actually just go into someone's name card and say, okay, I'm going to book a Calendly with this person. So I think that's been a really good way to kind of move away from Slack a little bit and aggregate information in one place. You can also find all the perks there too. So that's also fun for folks to take advantage of the discounts.
Gotcha. If you were ever a founder worried about feature completeness, LinkedIn is the #1 tool that we're all using and we all don't think does enough for what we need it to do. So it's a really great example of how you can be a multi-billion-dollar company and still be really not satisfactory at all to folks. Elise, how do you bring your community together online?
For sure. So when we were creating the program, we kind of wanted to start with simplicity and ease for the founders a little bit. We know that people are just getting set up on Insta pages and Figma and all these things and didn't want them to have 25 platforms cascading onto them. So we kind of started from a simplicity standpoint using Notion as our real central hub for the founders, Zoom, and then we use Slack a lot too, also to connect cohorts so that all the cohorts are interacting with each other. But no, we're not satisfied, and that's exactly why we're having a future of work cohort. And we see a lot of people coming in to ideate around that community. And then one thing we have started using, again, similar to Roslyn, it's a portfolio company, is a company called Upstream. And so you can do videos with people and then be matched into little like one-on-ones as if you were meeting in person. So we like that a lot too.
Gotcha. I actually just got a side question from an investor. And for investors who are, super excited about the idea of all of the best founders at the earliest of stages in one place, what is the best way for investors to get involved in your community? It was mentioned that, there's no on-deck demo day for me to show up to. I don't know if there are ones for other programs, but if I was an investor at that stage, like, I'm asking for me, how do I get involved? Elise, how do I?
For sure.
Contribute to the community?
Absolutely. We would love to have you involved. It's a huge value add to our community as well.
You don't have to say that just because we're on this thing.
No, for sure. This is for any investors. We've gotten a few of these. No, I think, part of it for us is building the relationship, right? So feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to anyone at Human Ventures. We'd love to get you to know you first and understand kind of the sectors that you specialize in. And then again, because our cohorts are themed, if you're a healthcare investor for our next health and wellness cohort, we're happy to consider you for that cohort. And investors, your other question was around a demo day. We do what's called a final critique. So it's kind of like a demo day in that people are presenting, but it's to a closed group of investors. And so those are people that are serving our investment committee and the Human Ventures investment team. So you would be invited to that as well if you're one of the advisors.
Gotcha. Cool. Roslyn?
Yeah, actually, exactly what Elise says. We'd love to build a relationship with you, so reach out directly. We don't have a demo day in the US right now, but that's something that we are open to, giving you a walkthrough of our entire portfolio and then learning about your investment approach and your specific spaces that you're interested in to make the right interest to our companies. So really open to that. I'll put my email down here in chat.
Okay. Shriya, how do I get involved other than through my favorite person who is now an On Deck member?
Yeah, so just to echo what Roslyn and Elise said, definitely reaching out directly works. And to me directly, I'm actually managing our entire calendar. And so I would love to get any investors on the calendar as speakers. Some of the things that we do to bring VCs in that are the most valuable for fellows are deep dives into a specific vertical. So just did one earlier today with Jamira Herrera from Cowboy Ventures, focused on the future of work this morning, and that was fantastic. So would love to get you in for a deep dive or office hours. I think that the best way to connect with fellows is to start to get to meet them individually and hear a little bit more about what they're working on and what they could use help with to offer your personal advice and experience.
Gotcha. Well, listen, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to have you all on, and if there's anything to be said for the power of community here, it makes me very happy to see my friend Mika, who just left a chat in the comments, who I first met in the New York tech community about 15 years ago. So, in terms of building relationships for the long term, you never know who your cohort buddy and the other folks in the program, when and where you'll be connected to them down the line, but I'm sure there are relationships that last for a long time. And I'm really excited to have all of these programs in New York, but open to others virtually, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to get together in person rather than on all of this stuff. But I'm glad we have these tools so we can do it beforehand. Thanks so much. Enjoy your day, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.